Lawrence Gentilello. Thanks very much for joining me today. How are you?
Good. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
So you're a pro. You're a CEO and co-founder of a company that is set to resolve some of the privacy issues online. But before we get started, just to set the stage, maybe provide some clout to what you're going to say. Walk me through memory lane. How did you get to where you are today?
Yeah. Yeah. Great question. Really, two things were the lead up to starting Optery. One was I had spent about 10 years in the consumer data space. Originally, I had a company called BlueKai, and then BlueKai was acquired by Oracle, and then at Accenture. And so I had spent a lot of time helping companies leverage consumer data really for marketing. And when I got into this space, it was a little more innocent. It was really about kind of targeted ads. But over time, the technologies were getting so advanced, and the cleverness of companies was getting really, really great. And the types of liberties that companies were taking with people's data got to be really, really just too extreme. And so what then started happening was privacy laws starting to get passed, like the CCPA and the GDPR. They gave consumers rights to opt out and say, delete my data. And so as I started to see that, I felt like there was an opportunity to create a software platform that delivered opt-out requests and data deletion requests at scale. And so that at that time was just sort of an idea. And then what really catalyzed things and really kind of brought things home was I became the victim of identity theft. Somebody had sort of profiled me and then created a fake ID in my name. And not only created a fake ID in my name, but created a fake ID in my wife's name and had, I believe, sourced a lot of the information to kind of build the profile and the dossier on myself based on information that was publicly posted by data brokers, people search sites that list up your spouse's name, your family members' names, home address, etc. And so when I became the victim of identity theft, it sort of all came together for me. Just my understanding of the data world from working at BlueKai, Oracle, and at Accenture, becoming a victim, and then seeing these laws that were starting to get passed. And I felt like there really needed to be a platform out there that submitted opt-out requests for people at scale.
Yeah, and I love that. It's one of the best origin stories, founder stories. When people come across a problem throughout their careers or personal life, or maybe both in your case, and come across a problem and they saw that there's no particular solution available, and then you go out and build something like that to resolve it. And actually, this topic is dear to my heart because, again, as a cybersecurity professional, I'm always interested to see what's available, on me online, and I've come across confidential information that is out there, and trying to opt out or remove myself, I came across tremendous hurdles. There's all kinds of they call it suppression tools, where they ask you to go through huge amount of. Anyway, so before we jump into that, let me ask you a couple questions. What do you think? So you mentioned that this has been around for a long time. So data collection, and people saying data is the new gold. So data collection is not new, right? The ability for companies to use that data to sell you and to get to you and then provide you what it is that they think that you want, that's not new either. What do you think happened in the past, I would say, several years that turned into this whole craziness of data explosion, and we as consumers, as individuals, are losing the battle in this space?
Yeah, I think really it's just that companies and adversaries have gotten very sophisticated. So, 10, 20 years ago, the use of the data was much more basic. And the real big original use case was for marketing. From my perspective, it was like you could think of direct mail, profiling neighborhoods based on types of income or how they vote, Republican or Democrat, and leveraging data for marketing. So start off direct mail, and then for email lists, like database marketing for email, and then for targeted ads. And it kind of got more and more sophisticated over time. And then meanwhile, you also had the increasing sophistication of cybersecurity adversaries that started to say, hey, we can have better targeted attacks. Just like marketers have better targeted ads and better targeted offers to consumers, they basically started saying, hey, we can use data to have better targeted attacks that are more efficient. So marketers increasing conversion rates, and an attacker is also increasing conversion rates for their own attacks. So I think the sophistication across the board just got greater and greater. And just the tools and technologies that were at people's disposal. Even now, AI is increasingly being used combined with public data sets to attack and infiltrate companies more than ever.
And one would say, I guess the flip side, I would say, I hate people reaching out to me with the wrong pitch or the wrong approach. People that haven't done a research into what it is that I care about or who I am. And it's a waste of my time. It's a waste of their time. And what would say that, I guess the flip side of it, maybe there's benefit of somebody knowing everything about me so they can kind of tailor, not from a nefarious perspective, but just tailor the kind of the pitch or to something that I really want and like. And then I will see the benefit of it. What can you say on that side of the house and the kind of the positive aspect of researching and knowing everything about me?
Yeah, it's been really hard to get. So there's privacy laws that have passed. So there was GDPR in Europe, and then there's been laws at the state level in California, Virginia, Texas, and Oregon. Laws go live on Monday, on July 1st. But it's been really hard to get something passed at the federal level. And as laws get further along, it becomes very evident that there's a lot of our economy is driven on data. And so I think a lot of lawmakers and people are really concerned that if you pull the rug out from under data for marketing, it can cause a lot of problems, especially for small businesses that rely on things like Google and Meta to deliver ads. And beyond that, just direct mail. And so if you sort of outlawed targeted marketing, it could put a damper on the economy. So much of the economy relies on data for marketing and customer relationships. So that is a big problem. Now, I think the other big thing is trust. And so you've got consumers that actually are often comfortable and fine with giving some companies information about themselves because they trust them. You might have a particular, retailer that you trust. Maybe let's say it's Nordstrom, and you're fine giving them your email address, your address, and information about your preferences because you trust that company. You trust that they're going to tailor offers towards you that you like. You can also maybe get discounts, etc. So there's sort of this world where if you just put a stop to everything, it would definitely have an impact on the economy. And there's other world where there's some companies that you trust and some things that you don't. And so I think a lot of what's happening now is through laws and through platforms like ours, it's around control for consumers and saying, okay, hey, these are these companies that I trust. They can have permission to my information. But these are these other companies that I don't trust. They can't have permission. And by the way, why is it that these 300 other companies that I've never even heard of, why should they be dealing in my information? So that's kind of really the vision that was for Optery when we started it, was a data rights management platform, a control system for your data. That in the past, you had no control over your information, just whatever data that companies or governments or adversaries grabbed on you, they just could use. But now more and more you're seeing control put in the hands of individuals and consumers through laws and through technology products like ours that deliver data rights requests backed by law. So it's really about control and trust.
And we'll talk about how exactly it is that you do that. So in essence, everyone collects information. Listen, I go to the doctor, to the dentist, and they give me a 10-page questionnaire about things that are not really relevant. They just collect. I don't even know why they're collecting it. I typically try to opt out of it. But almost everything you touch, you move, you move a location, you fill out a form for the USPS. Before you know it, you get bombarded with mail, like, say, hey, welcome to the new neighborhood. Here's a Home Depot. Here's, some cleaning services. Here's like furniture. Like, I mean, it's unbelievable. And all you wanted to do is essentially just move your address. It seems like this is completely out of control, not just in the digital world, also in the physical world. Like, as I mentioned to you, you go in and you relocate or you fill up of some forms. Aside from signing up for your service, and we'll talk about this, what can you as an individual do to circumvent that or be mindful? And some people will say, oh, well, I have nothing to hide. I don't really care, because I've heard that before from a privacy perspective.
Yeah, it's interesting that you used the example of a doctor's office. And historically, that was some place that you just had full trust. Literally, you would take your clothes off and give them your full history, and just give them anything and everything that they asked for. And so that's a classic example of someone that you might trust a lot. But at the same time, in today's day and age, you kind of can't really trust anyone. You don't know if that doctor's office is going to get hacked. You don't know if that trusted, vendor is going to get hacked.
You don't even need to have them hacked. I mean, I would say that some of them even sell that information to third party without your consent.
Yeah, exactly. And that's my point, is even in these most trusted of relationships, you kind of can't trust anyone. And not necessarily because you don't trust them, but you don't know how carefully they're protecting your information. So I think the question was like, what can you do? There's a lot of it's a massive problem, and it's not, there's no silver bullet. It's not like, oh, you go click this button, it's gonna all be fixed. It's like cybersecurity. I mean, there's just so many different vectors and so many different things that could go wrong. But there's a lot of basic things that you can do to start to protect yourself. I mean, you mentioned the change of address form with the United States Postal Service. That is a common way that your address gets propagated out to just hundreds or thousands of data brokers. You're letting them know your address has changed. There's a whole industry that's based off of knowing where you live. And by filing that change of address form with the post office, you now have basically broadcast your change of address to all of them. So what I recommend is never using the USPS's permanent change of address form. Just only do the temporary. So if you do the temporary, when you do a change of address, you can do it one of two ways. You can do a temporary and you can do a permanent. Don't do the permanent, because then you're permanently telling hundreds of data brokers where it is that you've moved. Do the temporary, use that temporary to buy some time to go change the addresses at the places that you want them changed, and to start monitoring your mail and saying, oh, this message was forwarded to me. It's a reminder, I need to go change my address there. So that's one. Two is there's a lot of services out there that will create one-time use, disposable use phone numbers and email addresses. So at a very bare minimum, some people that's too difficult. At a very bare minimum, what you could do that's actually not hard, it's not going to be really challenging, is to maybe create 5 email addresses: one for friends and family, maybe one for financial accounts, one for online e-commerce and vendors, and maybe one where if you walk into a restaurant, they ask you for an email, you kind of have to get it to give them get a table. So bare minimum, you could just create 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. But even better, there's a lot of kind of like one-time use disposable email services and phone number services as well. So to start to protect a trusted address or a trusted phone number, so that's another thing you can do. And there's really lots of things. One of the things you can do, which is what our company does, is you can opt out. So you can opt out yourself and go to a lot of these sites, go to a lot of these companies, opt out and take your information out of circulation. Opting out is not a one and done, and it's also not an off switch for unwanted email. It's not an off switch for unwanted phone calls, but it takes that information out of circulation. And over time, if you get better and better at this, and you're using your primary email or phone number in less places, you're opting out more and more places, you're going to start taking your information out of circulation. The other big thing, and I'll pause, is when you purchase a home. So real estate records are public data. And so when you purchase a home, that usually gets recorded in a county registry. And that's a big source of information for data brokers. Census data, real estate transaction data. Data brokers feed on that data. That's just a core asset that they review because it's public data. So more and more people will put their home, when they do a purchase, in a trust to conceal their names. Now, I always recommend doing that through a estate planning attorney that's skilled in privacy to get some advice through that. But that is a very common way that data is leaked, in addition to the change of address form with USPS, but also on real estate transactions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I believe the iPhones provide you a one-time email address or aliases, like right off the bat. So I think that there's options there, and that was very insightful. Thank you for that. And I believe also that it's not necessarily just a single source, like let's say the change of address. The problem starts when somebody's are connecting the dots. I don't know if people know this, but the majority, if not all, of the background check from a criminal perspective is attached to your name and your birth date. And so now you post your birth date on social media and they have your name. Is now all you have to do is match that. And then all of a sudden you matched up with an address, you match that with some other sources, and connecting the dots is what makes it quote unquote almost like dangerous, accurate. And then they can start building a real profile on you. And from an identity perspective, stolen, and again, maybe you can recommend as well to freeze your credit reports. But all of that becomes exponentially more dangerous. And then, as you mentioned, there's this kind of big data lake where all of these data points are now easily combined through quote unquote AI engine that can sift through millions of records and pinpoint a certain individual. Is that something that correct that I've just described?
And definitely. So one of the things that's interesting, so what our product does, it does two things. It's half search engine. So half of what we do is search hundreds of data broker sites to see if our customers' information is there. And when we first set up the product, what we did is we said, what's the minimum amount of information that we need from the customer to be able to find them with a high degree of confidence? First name and last name is not good enough. There might be hundreds of people with the same name. So start with sort of the full name, first, middle, last. The next thing that helps is city and state. So now you've narrowed down to someone that's in the same city. But if you add in that birthday, that really gets you high confidence. So when people sign up for our service, we have a free sign up. That's the minimum required because everyone gets a free scan. So if we have first name, last name, city, state, and all we really need is year of birth. That gets us close enough. It helps a lot better if we get month and date. But with that information, we can go out and search hundreds of data broker sites and find you with a high degree of accuracy, which then enables us to remove you. So those pieces of information are really helpful. But what we use and what adversaries use as well is additional information. So what we make it optional, another thing that's really helpful is actually family members' names. Because even then you might have people who are similar age, but if you have the same family members, maybe a spouse, a sibling, a parent, that helps a lot. And then past cities and states. You might have a lot of people with the name John Smith, age 40 in New York City, but only a subset of them that used to live in Miami. And then only a subset of them beyond that had similar family members' names. So we use a lot of the same methodologies and tactics that adversaries use to find people, but we use them to find them and then remove them. So to your point, the more data that you have, the more accurate that your targeting can be, whether that's targeting for marketing. And this is why Google and Meta have such powerful marketing platforms, because they have all the data. They know where you live. They know which, IP addresses you're accessing Google from. They know your family members' names. They know everything. And then increasingly adversaries are beginning to know everything by crawling the web and sourcing data sets from the dark web. And so what we did is we sort of said, hey, what are the types of tools and techniques and methodologies that large marketers like Google and Meta use and that adversaries use? How can we bring those same types of methodologies to find people with high accuracy and then layer on the delivery of legal demands to get information removed? So to your point, yeah, there's an arms race. And this is why we started the company. Was consumers have always just been showing up with knives and popsicle sticks, and you've got these nuclear weapons at the big tech companies, and increasingly in with AI in their hands with adversaries. And so we felt like there's this like massive power imbalance between consumers who had just basically rights but no tools, and rights but no knowledge of like who are these companies. And you got lawyers, and you got tech, and you got AI, and you got data out in these other hands. And so that's really why we started the company, was to arm consumers. They've shown up with just completely outgunned.
And these identity brokers, I mean, they profit from that, right? You go out and you search for somebody, even out of curiosity, or like even a business partner, and then they come out with this, okay, they start, and it's some of these sites, I mean, I have to tell you, they look a little fishy and odd. They do, quote unquote, they make it look like they're searching and show you all kinds of stuff, and then all of a sudden, after 2 minutes or whatever, they say, oh, if you want to get the full report, just pay us like whatever, $15, $20, $30 or whatever. And just the whole thing looks a little odd to me. And I also know that again, from experience, there's a lot of these aliases for the same company, meaning that there's one database, and then there's like, 10 different, names, and almost storefront for the exact same thing, where they, and the whole thing is really out of control. Now, let me ask you this. As somebody who lives on the East Coast, New York, New Jersey, let's talk about regulatory compliance. Are we protected? Because again, and I'm going to jump into the question I brought up at the beginning. Some of these data brokers that tell you, well, you have to fill out this suppression tool, basically, meaning that you have to verify information that you didn't give them to begin with. And you have to go through a 15 steps process. I mean, my God, you got to hire somebody to do this. And then they tell you, oh, if you make the request, so we feel like it, and you've made, you took all those 15 steps, we'll remove or we'll suppress your data. And there's some of them are really cheeky about it. I mean, they're like, if you ask them to say, no, I don't want to fill this out, it's too complicated for me, they say, well, we're sorry, that's our way for us to remove it. So I know it's a kind of long preempted question, but what can you do, from a regulatory perspective? Can you file a complaint? Is it something you do? And do you really have to go through all this crazy suppression tools to remove your information?
Yeah, so there's sort of 3 points there. And the first point is there's a wide spectrum of data brokers that are out there. And some are truly just sort of bottom feeder scum. And others are really kind of more on the up and up, above board. They're kind of doing their best to play by the rules. And there's everything in between. So one example that I like to give is Nielsen. Like going back in the old days, Nielsen would kind of like get permission from people to put a device in their home to monitor what it was that the television program that they're watching. That was it
was a huge business.
Yeah, it's still
a huge business. Yeah.
And so that's an example of like, it's a trusted relationship, and they're a data broker. So they would take that information and they would sell it to the networks and say, this is what people are watching. These are the popular shows. These are the unpopular shows. And so that's an example of, a company that sort of did it very transparently. And there's other companies out there that have these kind of layered shell corporations in Cyprus and other countries. They completely ignore opt-out requests. They use fake identities as to who the leadership of the companies, people that don't even exist, and just kind of horrendous types of companies. And there's everything in between. There's a lot of big respectable companies in the data world, Oracle, Comscore, Nielsen, etc. So it's a large spectrum. That's kind of point one. And you get something a little different with everyone. Two is a state-by-state patchwork today. We don't have a federal privacy law in the United States. So it means that at the state level, some states have them enacted and others don't. The good news is there's been a cascade of laws. I think because this is something consumers really care about, they really want. They are advocating for themselves to their lawmakers. Started in California. Like I said, Texas, Oregon goes live on Monday of next week, and there's more that are going live. Montana, I think, goes live in October, and more going live next year. So that's great. And unfortunately, the good and the bad news. So if you're in a state with a privacy law, you've got some real rights. It makes our jobs easier and consumers' jobs easier when they want to get information removed, because data brokers may say, hey, look, like you're in California, you're in Texas, we have to honor what you're asking for. But if you're in a state that doesn't, like New York, for example, or Washington State, for example, you actually don't have the right to opt out. If you want to opt out, the data broker is doing you a favor and in opting you out. They don't have to. And as the volume of the opt-outs has started to increase, we're starting to see some data brokers say, hey, look, like if you're in a state with the privacy law, we'll honor the opt-out. If you're not, we're not going to. Whereas in the past, the volume was lower and they would just say, hey, we'll just do it for everybody. But we're starting to see a separation out of, if you're not in a state with the privacy law, you better get one passed in your state. Otherwise you can't opt out. So that's kind of like the second thing. And, you know, the last thing is really kind of what you mentioned on the suppression lists is every data broker has a slightly different process. So you mentioned in one case, they're asking for additional information. They're making you jump through a bunch of hoops. In some cases, it's very simple. In some cases, they make it difficult. And like you said, it's kind of hard and it's really kind of an intractable problem for a lot of people. So that's where services like ours come in. Some people prefer to do this themselves and they just spend, you know, hours on the weekends searching through things and submitting them. And it's all different. So, you know, we cover a few hundred data brokers and everyone's a little bit different, where sometimes they're asking for a URL, like what's the URL that you found, put that in, or sometimes they ask for
So Horace, do you do that for your clients? Do you fill out those suppression requests and go through it? Because again, the process is tedious.
Yeah, and that's basically our reason for existence. So Optery is two things. One is this powerful search engine, and we make that available for free. So we have a freemium model. Anybody can sign up. You sign up, you get a free scan. We search through hundreds of sites. We have a couple patents around the technology, and then we send you a report, on average of about 100 screenshots. So we don't just say, oh, we found you on 100 sites. We actually send you about 100. It varies. It could be 50, it could be 20, it could be 120. About 100 screenshots where we show you these are actually screenshots of where your profiles are made. We make that available for free. And we run those every 3 months for free. And then if we have self-service tools where we say, hey, look, if you don't want to spend any money on this, you can go and click through the opt-out links and submit the opt-outs yourself, or you can upgrade. And that's how we make our money. And then we have software that automatically goes out and populates forms, sends emails, manages the back and forth communications with these companies. I just don't know how people have the time to do it themselves. Some out there do it, but for busy people that don't have the time or just the knowledge, increasingly more and more people are outsourcing the work. And initially this kind of like industry, we're not the only ones in the industry. There's some other companies. It started off originally with consumers, but increasingly the biggest growth vector in our industry right now is companies and the government. So more and more, this is viewed as a serious cybersecurity tool to get executives, employees, judges, police officers, election workers, politicians, information off the web.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it carries some risk, right? Depending on who even if you're an executive for some company and the company is not very liked, or there's always, if you do business, you're not very liked. If you're like a really, really big company, there's going to be some people who are going to be against it. So what about potentially finding content online that's related to you that's wrong? Maybe fake profiles, maybe incorrect, maybe defamatory information. Do you do anything about that?
We don't. I mean, cybersecurity itself, massive space. And then we kind of fit in this, we're kind of in one little niche. And even with our niche, kind of rushing up against us is like reputation management and brand management, which is something we don't do. So I know there's a lot of other companies out there that will monitor for fake websites. So let's just use our Nordstrom example again. You might have, Nordstrom, who owns Nordstrom.com, but then you might have scammers that are building out like Nordstrom Store.xyz or, Nordstrom, Inc.io. And so that's a whole kind of subsector where companies are scanning and searching for impersonating types of sites. We don't do that today. The other one is like what you mentioned, sort of content. And that's what I refer to as like reputation management. Reputation management is, okay, somebody Googled me and there's some like stuff that I like, and maybe there's like a negative review or an article that doesn't, paint, me in a favorable light. How do I push that stuff down? Is there a way I can get that removed? And that's a whole nother space. We've decided to really focus in on the data broker problem and just make that our niche. Also, it allows us to keep the costs down. Usually, those other types of services are much more consultative. They're just like they're more. There's just like a lot more angles to work. Whereas us, it's much more formulaic. I mean, our lowest tier plan is a few dollars a month, and so we're kind of focused more on scale and focus as opposed to kind of this more holistic thing. There's other things out there. If you're like, hey, look, like we want to protect our brand, or we've got reputation management issues. So it's another area. The other thing that the big movement in the space right now is you're starting to see a lot of lawsuits against AI companies. We're basically doing what data brokers have always done. What data brokers have always done is saying, hey, any information I can get my hands on, I'm just going to use it. And AI companies now are saying this data is really valuable. It's really important to us. I'm going to just start using anybody's information. The canonical case here is when the New York Times sued OpenAI because OpenAI basically just gobbled up all the New York Times whole website and started using that to train their models. And New York Times said, no, you're not going to do that anymore. So you're seeing that. Unfortunately, not all creators or writers have the legal resources to take on Microsoft or Google or OpenAI, but it is a big issue that you've got. In the past, it was sort of these data sets, but now it's people's actual creative work that's being hijacked and usurped. And so we're going to see that kind of play out over the next years. AI is brand new, obviously. So, well, at least AI is brand new in the public consciousness.
And in recent years, we've seen a tremendous influx of data breaches. So all these companies that collect, started with like the big one, the Target, but there's so many, like where millions of records of consumers and individuals get siphoned in into this black hole of somebody's computer, and then they go out and they sell it in the dark web, which is really just another form of web where people access information and they buy it. That includes credit card information, identities, and whatnot. What do you do in that regards? Because what you just described, and even though there's some sleazy data brokers, they're still not considered dark web, or they're not the kind of nefarious entities. What do you do about that piece, if you do at all?
Yeah. So again, we're all just sort of laser focused on this problem of data brokers, and for better for worse, we've just chosen not to tackle dark web. So dark web monitoring, in my view, is a bit of a commodity product. There's a lot of companies out there. There's nothing you can do about it. What is good to know is that you can know if your an email and a password combination has been compromised, and that tells you that it's a good thing to go change. I mean, it's baked into Chrome. It's baked into iPhone. iPhone, you've got a security area that actually does dark web monitoring for you. So our view was basically, hey, Apple provides it, Google provides it, most services out there provide it. If people, it's important. You can't get it removed, but the knowledge, the awareness, the transparency, they tell you, oh, I need to go change my password, or that's a password, I'm using it elsewhere. So we don't touch that, but it's definitely an important area, and there's a lot of companies out there that do.
And do you think that, or do you believe that we are going to get to, here in the States, the kind of GDPR level of the right to be forgotten? For those people who are not familiar with that, there's the ability for someone to request all their information, data to be completely removed. So not just like in a sense that they're not going to be available anymore, no, but they can request to be deleted, and then they have the ability to request that the close the loop on it, basically ask the company to showcase that they've deleted it. Is that something that we're going to see here?
Well, so what's happening, so California has been the pioneer in data privacy in the US. So California passed the first privacy law, which went into effect in 2020. And now many states don't have anything, but more and more are coming online. California just passed another law called the California Delete Act, which goes into effect in January of 2026, in about a year and a half. And it is, just as CCPA was years ahead of everybody else, it is years ahead of everybody else. And it's really amazing because they're creating a centralized, almost like a do not call, we have a national do not call registry. They're creating that for data brokers, and it's called DROP. I forget what the acronym, what it actually spells out. But basically, consumers can go and submit once to drop, and then data brokers are required to honor the requests from drop. The provision also has a carve out for authorized agents, like which is what our company does. So consumers can go there directly, or they can go through an authorized agent, and that then will propagate the opt-out requests to hundreds of data brokers. So if you look at California as the leader historically on things like emission standards and fair credit access and data privacy, California leads the way. And so it's really great to know that California now has a centralized opt-out mechanism that's going to go live in a year and a half. And based on that, likely you'll start to see more stuff happen across other states. I think Texas has a provision as well for something similar. I've got to believe that we'll get something at the federal law that give all United States citizens the opportunity to have something like this. But I will say I've been disappointed over and over again for many years. So I always have felt like we were a year or two away from a federal privacy law, but that's been for the last like 6 years. So I don't know. Every year or two, another like possibility comes up. Like I think a year or two ago it was the American Privacy Rights Act, and then there's another one that just kind of got a little bit of traction, but they really just die every year. There's one supposed to happen, and it was COVID. And there's another supposed to happen, and it was Ukraine, and then now it's election year, and so it just keeps getting pushed out. So we'll see if it happens. I'm very hopeful, but we'll see. It's been really hard to get something like that passed at the federal.
Well, are you hopeful because then you're going to have more teeth, like clout for you to act upon, or because eventually, like, I mean, you don't want to be out of business if everybody stops doing it. There's no legitimized business, ability to sell this type of product.
Yeah, it's a little tricky, and quite honestly, it's unknown. So one of the analogies that I like to use is TurboTax, H&R Block, tax Slayer. So you can file a tax report with the IRS for free. You don't have to pay anybody to do that. But there's been software that has been built that enables you to do that much more efficiently and layers in a better customer experience and just a more effective ultimate solution. And so I believe that companies like Optery are going to layer themselves over whatever it is that the government provides. So we are already working on layer ourselves over on top of the California Delete Act. In the near term, we're probably going to have custom layers over, what's happening in Texas and other places. Ultimately, also in the at the federal level, something like that comes out. So one, I don't think anybody knows how it will play out and what it'll look like. But even the do not call registry, that doesn't really work so well. Like a lot of people still use services like ours because they say, hey, I did the do not call registry, but I'm still getting calls and texts. And then they use ours, and then their texts and calls goes down dramatically. So if you look at the do not call registry, that was not a death knell for unwanted phone calls and text messages. You still need professional and technology at your disposal, but we'll see. It's a little bit unknown. I'm not super worried about it though, to be honest.
And yeah, it's amazing that they enacted this do not call list, and their fines are tremendous. I mean, the FCC, I think, can put in a significant fine, but yet there's robocalls because I guess you get rerouted from somewhere else. And I would say, and you ask a question, okay, why don't the telcos block these? They have a ability to see who's calling. And the same question then, you can translate that to, why don't the search engines suppress these data brokers, or maybe provide some another thing? Or so you want a data broker, fill in this information. Why are you looking for this? And then because then they will kill the kind of the whole business model, because now you search somebody's name, there's 50 data brokers, and some of them are very sleazy show up. Why do they show up on the first page? Why can't you suppress those?
Yeah, it's a very tough problem. And this has been a problem that's vexed people. The FTC put out a big report 10 years ago in 2014 that highlighted a lot of these same issues, and they flagged all the data brokers, and there's all these problems, and consumers are being harmed. That was 10 years ago. And not much has changed. Almost nothing has changed at the federal level. but we have seen change at the state level. It's very hard. There's a lot of, there's also, so yep, I always think about it from both perspectives. So data brokers say, hey, we've got rights to, a lot of this information is public information, and it's not illegal in many places. And there's even issues that data brokers lean back on as identity verification, where it's sometimes people don't necessarily validate their identity. And so data brokers will say, hey, we don't know exactly who you are, so we're not going to honor it. So that's one of going back to like, well, what happens if you get to be the federal level? One of the things we work with that we spent a lot of time on is validating with the data brokers that this is who you got, 500 John Smiths. This is our John Smith. So it's not, it's a really, really tough problem. You mentioned search engines. Google about a year ago came out with something, so here's like the maybe part of the problem. Part of the problem is you've got the data brokers posting stuff up on the web and on their sites, and then Google goes in and indexes those sites and then has their little snippets, right? Where if you search for someone's name, it'll, have, say, a link to someone that been verified. And in the snippet, it'll list like maybe the city and state or maybe their age or something like that. So Google came up with something about a year ago where you can go into Google and submit basically a removal request from Google's cache. Now that doesn't remove it from the source. It doesn't prevent somebody from just going to, been verified and searching for somebody, but it does remove it from Google's cache. So that was a nice step forward, but it's also just, it doesn't do anything about removing it from the source. So it's just a very, very tough problem. And at the telcos is a whole nother animal. But yeah, it's just a really big, multifaceted problem. Everybody's got their turf. Everybody got their turf they're staked out and trying to defend and protect.
Yeah, and it's more than privacy. I mean, the consequences of somebody having that data and then decided to target you. And I'll give you an example. I get this weekly calls like, hey, are you looking for remote work? And this is a phishing attempt or whatever. There's somebody sending out, collecting information, and God forbid I answer, then immediately they send it over to someone else to start working on me. And potentially, the next thing is that I'm going to send out some information or whatever for like this fake job. They ask me to pay, or before you know it, my bank account is going to get cleared out. So, yeah. And this happens on a daily basis. And I suspect the numbers are much higher. A lot of people just are shy and they're too afraid to report it. But again, just to be clear, this is not just, like my privacy. I want to be a private person. This has some major consequences for people's lives. I would say, especially the people that are at high risk, maybe elderly, just uninformed, people are just are not aware that these things happen. Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely. There's kind of like three vectors there of like what you described. So vector one is dark web stuff, and that's basically stuff that was compromised. It's on the dark web. It's in databases somewhere, files somewhere that attackers are just getting in using. And probably the best thing to do there is to use these disposable emails, disposable phone numbers, have several different ones so that it's hard for them to track down like what's your actual trusted number, and maybe use that trusted number just in certain places, or even shut things off. So there's solutions out there that give you the ability to have almost like masked phone numbers and emails. So that would kind of like protect you there, where if you say, hey, I just got a text message on this one of my 10 numbers from one of these phishing attacks, that tells you that's been compromised. It's time to start shutting that one down. That's kind of one vector, and that's really the kind of, in my mind, the best thing to do. The second vector is information that's just on the public web through data brokers. So I just have a friend who I just showed them like how our solution worked. I just Googled their name and I sent them 2 links that had their cell phone number and their home address. And I just said, by the way, when you use Optery, that goes away, within weeks. So the second way that could happen is you've got bad actors crawling the web, crawling these sites, harvesting your cell phone, your home address. So what would you do there? Well, the way you could do there is start opting out and removing yourself from those sites. So now you can maybe eliminated or dramatically reduce the access to your information from there. And then the last one is like quote unquote respectable data brokers, which is like ZoomInfo, Rocket Reach, Clearbit, Apollo. these are, companies that are by and large above board, but they sell people's phone numbers and email addresses. And so they don't, some cases, they don't publish them on the web, but they publish profiles on the web, and then you can buy them from them. So you should be opting out of those sites, whether just directly or through a service like Optery. So if you look at that problem, say, hey, I just got this unwanted text message. Clearly, this is something like bad stuff going on here. There's probably 3 broad categories that it could have originated from. And you've got 3 different strategies to start to get it removed. But there's no one like silver bullet, which is I mentioned at the beginning. Like you can take it out of circulation, you can start to remove it, but it's really hard to just completely eliminate because you're only 1 week away or 1 day away from another breach or another, doctor's office whose IT team didn't secure their customer list, right? So, yeah. But you can take it out of circulation. You can start to remove it. You can make it harder, So that's what we do.
Well, just so you don't, become a sitting duck.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, when there's money involved, credit card companies are selling your data. Everybody's out there and when I mentioned at the beginning, data is the kind of the new gold. It's becoming a commodity to be sold and bought. And so therefore, I wish there was more way for us, individuals to control it. But this is a step in the right direction. So let me ask you one last question. This was really phenomenal. And then I ask you about how to get in touch with you and how to opt into the service. Can someone really vanish and get off the grid these days? Is this even possible? Because I've seen some YouTube videos and people say, if you want to vanish. I know that in Japan, which is really interesting, there's about 40 to 50,000 people that kind of vanish, and there's services for that, meaning that they decide to kind of disappear because of whatever reason, maybe the business failure, maybe family failure, and they just vanish completely, and then they get new identity. Is this something, and I'm not saying that you should offer that as a service, but is this something that's really doable, as people can just really get themselves completely removed?
Yeah, so one of the things you mentioned just to start with is one thing that people can do is if you're in a state that doesn't have a privacy law, make noise with your lawmakers because it can help. And that helps a lot is just if your state has a privacy law on the book. So that's one thing that anybody...
Lawrence, just when you say make noise, can you just be more specific? What can you do? You just have to find out the representative and just write them an email, complain about it, leave them a voicemail?
Yeah, I think most states have kind of state senators and your congressmen that you can send emails to, send letters to. There's a lot of open forums out there for people to air what's important to them. So I think just tracking down your local politicians and informing them this is something you care about. So I think that's something that everybody can do. But going completely off the grid. So Michael Basil, who I'm sure you know, he's got I think his podcast has now been I think he's no longer doing anymore, but his podcast Extreme Privacy was the model for that, was just completely concealing yourself from anyone and everyone. Fascinating podcast. I've listened to most of the episodes, and it's a lot of work. It's beyond the capability probably of most people of what he does. I mean, he literally puts his cell phone in a Faraday bag before he gets to his home so that his home can't be triangulated by telco provided cell phone company or apps, etc. So really, really hard to do in today's day and age, but certainly possible with a lot of effort and work. You need to start, this is a huge effort that would go into it. Even things like disposable credit cards, using a PO box or drop boxes instead, don't get anything sent to your home. There's a whole range of things that you can do. Is it possible? I'd say if Michael Basil had anything to say about it, I would say the answer is yes, but I would say a tremendous amount of work would go into it. It might be a little bit out of the realm of feasibility. Even if you think of things like if you have kids, oftentimes if you have kids, you have to sign them up for sports, or you have to sign them up in school, or they have apps now to monitor computer communications. That is a way that information gets out, mapped up to your address. I mean, when you sign up for a Little League team or a softball team, they're asking you what's your address, and now that's in a database somewhere. So very hard for most people to do, but there's definitely a lot of steps that you can take to protect yourself.
and wait until they enforce digital currencies. I think even the cash option is going to go away. You're going to have to literally just
Yeah.
move to a farm and grow your own food.
Yeah. 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 I think that the it's kind of like you have your home and you've got your home security approach, and it starts with locking doors and windows. Maybe it's got motion lights that turn on if somebody walks in front of your home, cameras. You can kind of keep going. You can even go to like a bunker underground. But if somebody shows up with a bazooka, you're gonna knock your front door down. So it's sort of like, it's very similar with personal privacy and security. Like if you can just take continued successive steps and to continue to make yourself more and more secure, but
Yeah,
kind of a little bit tough.
and Lawrence, I highly recommend you become a privacy prepper. And I would say to start up with signing up to your service. So now's the time to tell me about, like, how can I sign up? You mentioned there's a freemium version. Talk to me about that, and then upgrading the services. What do you get, and what's the easiest way to get on board?
Yeah, so a couple of things. So one is we have a freemium model, so anybody can create a free account for a free scan and self-service tools to do this themselves. And then we have premium tiers where you can upgrade, and we make it really flexible. You can do monthly or yearly. You can pause your subscription. You can cancel it, and we monthly scan and remove. There's other services out there. They're not all the same. So one of the things that I always like to reference to people is us and our competitors. It's not a commodity product. Optery has won the PC Mag Editor's Choice most outstanding product in the market the last 3 years in a row. We were named one of 3 winners for privacy and security by Fast Company for last year, Next Big Things in Tech. We just won 3 cybersecurity excellence awards for best employee privacy protection, attack surface management. And so, the products are not commodities. There's other products out there that have a ton of marketing and they got a bunch of stuff out there. I always advocate, try out the free tier. If this is something that you want to get into, try out the free tier for a few different products, get a feel for it, see how good the products are before you make a decision. So yeah, in any case, we have tens of thousands of paying customers, hundreds of businesses use us. We've gone through rigorous security reviews before landing our product inside of government agencies, Fortune 500 companies, etc. There's definitely some kind of like services out there that aren't as good, and there's some services out there that are a lot better. We like to think that ours is the best.
Absolutely. And then the website, is there a particular URL? Is there a hotline?
Yeah, so it's Optery. So the company's Optery, and the name comes from opt, like OPT, opt in, opt out, and then ERY, like bakery or eatery or factory.
Optery.com.
Yep, and it's Optery.com. That's the best way to do it. OPTERY.com, Optery.com, and then we've got that's the best place to go. Yeah,
Fantastic. Lawrence, it's been really awesome having this conversation today. I learned a lot personally. And I second your journey. I think it's a viable and important step in the right direction. You're providing a service that's much needed, not just individuals that they want to be private. I think it's for everyone. I think everybody should be conscious and mindful in terms of what it is that they're sharing online and offline, and be the step in the right direction and start having control over their assets, which is their information.
Definitely. Yeah, it was a great conversation. Really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you very much. And until then, to all of those who joined, I'll see you in the next episode. Stay safe online as well as offline, and take care all.